Hello my fellow humans. All new technologies have numerous designs in their development stage, but most of them don't go further than a drawing on a sheet of paper. Once they do get to the prototype stage are most often either too dangerous, too complex, too expensive, or they simply do not work. Nonetheless, there are usually few designs that meet all the requirements to succeed, and with time, these inventions are then incorporated into our daily lives. What usually happens with adoption of new technologies is that within a generation or two we start taking them for granted, and the same was true for electricity and associated technology. It wasn't always obvious that electricity will be generated in large centralized power stations, that its distribution would be done mainly with three-phase AC current via 50 Hz transmission lines, and that household voltage will be 230 volts. Now before we get to the main topic, I will begin with a brief history of electricity so we can understand how this system became the norm across the planet. Jokes aside, in fact, direct current was produced before alternating current thanks to Alessandro Volta and his invention of electrochemical battery, aka voltaic pile, in late 18th century. These batteries were at the time the only option for producing continuous electrical current, but everything changed in 1831 with the discovery of electromagnetic induction by Michael Faraday. Later that year, Michael also introduced world's first electric generator called Faraday Disk. However, this device was inefficient and could only produce direct current. Now if we fast forward one more year, we get our first AC generator, which was built by a skilled French instrument maker, Hippolyte Pixii. His device was based on Faraday's principles of electromagnetic induction that produce alternating current with a rotating magnet under the wire coil. But because there was no use for AC during this time period, he also added a commutator so he could generate a slightly more useful, pulsating direct current. After the introduction of usable electric generator and subsequently motor, the stage was set for a boom of innovation. In the following years, hundreds of patents were filed for various designs of electric motors, prototypes of early electric trains, toy cars, cars and boats were constructed, and generators began to reach ever higher power outputs, which made electricity practical for industries and for public use. This development has also led to generators becoming our main supplier of electricity, while batteries took a back seat. We arrived to the next milestone in 1880s, where the consolidation of key technologies such as centralized power stations, transformers, transmission networks, induction motors, and good old incandescent light bulb was the main factor which set second industrial revolution into motion. The backbone of this system was alternating current, as it provided all the necessary properties which these key technologies needed for efficient operation. Electricity was generated in large power stations which mostly used hydropower and fossil fuels as an energy source. Afterwards, step-up transformers were needed to increase the voltage for transmission over long distances. This was mainly done because during transmission, high voltage reduced both energy loss and cost. On consumer side, electricity was then stepped down to more usable lower voltages, so homes and industries could utilize it. Networks based on direct current such as tourist systems were also possible. However, they were vastly less efficient and more expensive to operate compared to those using AC. And there were mainly two reasons for this. Firstly, DC generators were inferior to AC generators in nearly every category that mattered. Their voltage output was lower, they needed frequent maintenance, they were less efficient, and their short-circuit possibility was higher. Secondly, there was no reliable DC conversion technology such as transformers that could increase or decrease voltage. And as we already established, this component was crucial for long-distance transmission, and without it, DC networks never had a chance. And now, 130 years later, this system based on alternating current is still essentially the same. The most important addition was the introduction of nuclear fission reactors as a new power source in early 1950s. However, these reactors are basically the same as other thermal power plants, meaning they all produce heat to power steam turbines in order to generate electricity. They are just a bit more efficient and sustainable. In early 20th century there was a chaos of standards around the world, especially for electricity transmission and distribution. But since then we agreed upon a few that we all still use today. For long-distance transmission we use three-phase power lines with a voltage ranging from 110 to 800 kV. For primary distribution voltage is stepped down to 5 to 35 kV, and for secondary distribution or households we use either a single-phase 120, 230 or three-phase 400 volt systems. These networks are also using a frequency of 50 to 60 Hz, which is a compromise to meet all the necessary requirements for power generation, transformers, electric motors, and lighting. Direct current and DC technologies were still present, but they assumed a lesser role. Long story short, in 1930s, mercury arc wave technology allowed reliable DC voltage conversion that paved the way for extra high voltage transmission systems we have today. These so-called power superhighways are used as a point-to-point bulk power transmission system, which is less expensive and more efficient over long distances compared to AC ones. Direct current was also adopted on the other side of the spectrum, where low or extra low voltage was required for operation in systems such as electronics, fuel cells, batteries, and for applications that use batteries as a power source. Now, if you take a look at what has been happening on the electrification front for the last 5 to 10 years, we can once again see a convergence of key technologies. These technologies are renewable power generation, energy storage systems, communication information technologies, and automation. These are all disruptive technologies in the respective fields. However, in this case we'll mostly focus on how sustainable electricity generation and storage, such as photovoltaics and home battery systems, can further democratize the electricity sector while also allowing our homes to become self-sufficient. In order to achieve all of this, we will first need to scale down and scatter power generation and storage systems across the country. However, accomplishing decentralization with our current predominant energy systems is not feasible. Therefore, we'll have to find another solution. And here is where photovoltaics, aka rooftop solar, comes into play. Solar panels have been commercially available for decades, yet they have only become a realistic option for primary power generation in the last few years. And with today's availability, low cost, relatively high efficiency and long life expectancy, they are also our best solution for home use. The only question is whether rooftop installation can provide enough electricity to meet consumption needs of the average household. So let's find out. This household is located in continental Europe, and with all modern home appliances, its electricity consumption is around 11 kWh a day or 4000 kWh a year. Roof design is called gable roof, which is also the most common design in that region, and has a surface area of 200 square meters. However, for installation of solar panels, we'll utilize only 50 square meters or somewhat half of the roof. These are standard 330 watt monocrystalline panels, which have an efficiency of 19.8% and a surface area of 1.6 square meters. Now, if we divide the surface area intended for rooftop solar with the size of a single solar panel and then multiply this number with its rated power, we get a rooftop solar installation which has a combined rated power of 10,000 watts. Next question is, how much electricity will our solar installation be able to produce annually? To answer this, we'll require information about direction and tilt of the roof, efficiency of solar panels, solar irradiance, and etc. But finding this out would take too much time, so we'll take a shortcut and use an app called Global Solar Atlas. Here we can find different types of solar irradiance data for almost the entire planet. However, as we're trying to find out the solar PV potential for our region, searching with specific photovoltaic power output is an ideal option. It uses a unit called kilowatt-hours per kilowatt peak, which lets us know how much energy a standard 1 kilowatt solar installation with optimal position will be able to produce annually. Now, if you look at the map, we can see that 1150 kilowatt-hours per kilowatt peak is basically the average for Europe. And if we multiply this value with our 10 kilowatt rooftop solar, our yearly production would be 11,000 kilowatt hours, which is almost 2 times more than what we currently consume. And even if you were located in the northern parts of Scotland, you would still generate 8,000 kilowatt hours a year. We established that rooftop solar power generation can provide more than enough electricity to cover annual consumption needs of an average household. However, as you know, the sun does not always shine, and if you want to have access to electricity whenever you need it, grid connection is still necessary. So here is where batteries, our second disruptor technology, come into play. Together with rooftop solar, they will minimize our power grid dependence and allow us to become more self-sufficient. First option is to add as much battery capacity in combination with rooftop solar so they can be used as our main power source. Even though this setup would satisfy majority of our electricity needs, grid connection will still be necessary for selling solar surplus and to prevent shortages when there is a period of cloudy or cold winter days. Second option is to go off-grid and become self-reliant. For this we'll need to at least double but preferably triple battery storage capacity from previous option, in order to attain stable electricity supply throughout the year. However, this setup will be quite expensive and would only make sense if you lived in an area where grid connection was not possible. And for our third option, we'll choose a relatively new network that will truly revolutionize the field of energy management and exploit batteries to their full potential. This network is called Virtual Power Plant and is basically a decentralized energy production and storage system that uses cloud-based information communication technologies and Internet of Things devices for its operation. The two most important benefits of virtual power plant adoption will be increased power grid stability and further democratization of this sector that will allow everyone to participate in the electricity market. But today we're mostly focusing on the latter one. Our societies across the world consume from a few hundred megawatt hours to a few thousand gigawatt hours of electricity every day. And if you want to participate in this sector with our rooftop solar battery system, those few 10 kilowatt hours a day we have to offer is just a drop in the ocean. But this all changes if we start participating as a community. And here is where virtual power plant starts making sense. As a real-world example, we'll make use of a small municipality where 100 households decided to adopt this system. Every house installed a 10 kilowatt rooftop solar that will generate on average 30 kilowatt hours a day and a 13.5 kilowatt hours battery storage or a single Tesla Powerwall. But as a responsible battery owners, they will allow only 10 kilowatt hours of its capacity to be actively used. All of these individual networks or houses are connected to the virtual power plant that synchronizes their operation and acts as a control center. The end result of this collaboration is a power plant with 3 megawatt hours of daily solar production and a battery storage capacity of 1 megawatt hour. The next step is market participation. Batteries will be charged from the grid during the night when the price of electricity is at its lowest. And in the morning, when demand rises and price is usually at least 3 times higher, electricity stored in batteries will be sold back to the grid. During the day, solar panels will be used to satisfy our domestic electricity needs, charge batteries, and if there is any solar surplus, it will be sold to the grid. In the evening, when demand is again higher, electricity generated with solar panels and stored in batteries will be sold once more to the grid. A virtual power plant along with batteries and solar power is one of several solutions that will allow us to achieve more reliable and sustainable energy management. However, in my part of the world, where around 60% of population lives in standalone houses, it can make a big difference and become our primary energy system. Besides that, it's the democratizing features that also make this system appealing, as we're still regarded only as consumers who have little to no leverage in decision-making process about how and where electricity will be produced and what will be done with generated profits. And now with consolidation of before mentioned technologies, we're introduced with virtual solar battery power plant, which will not only provide energy self-sufficiency, but it will also enable market participation where we'll be able to profit from electricity trading if we contribute as a community. We can say that Nikola Tesla is viewed as the face of alternating current who has fought against direct current for dominance in late 19th century. However, today his namesake company Tesla is the largest promoter of DC technologies and could be regarded as the face of direct current. Talk about irony. Although I don't think Nikola would oppose any technology which helps to enrich people's lives and furthers democratization of our society.